Every fork froze midair. Crystal glasses paused in trembling hands. The golden chandeliers above Spago Beverly Hills burned down onto a scene no one in that exclusive dining room would ever forget. Patricia Hartwell, blonde, manicured, dressed in ivory Chanel, stood like a queen presiding over her throne. Her hand still hovered in the air, freshly withdrawn from striking another woman across the face. Her victim, Celeste Williams, a young black woman in a simple navy dress, seated calmly at a table she had every right to occupy. Gasps rippled across the crowded restaurant. Phones whipped up instantly, capturing the scene, narrating in whispers. She slapped her. Wait, why? Who is she? Patricia's voice sliced through the air with venom and entitlement. People like you don't belong here. Her words tasted of money, arrogance, and prejudice, dripping onto the polished marble floor with the kind of casual cruelty that has haunted every black woman who's ever been told to shrink, to leave, to know her place. Celeste didn't cry out. No scream, no retreat. She simply touched the burning cheek with trembling fingers. Behind the sting, behind the humiliation, behind the silence, there was something else, simmering, something that would turn Patricia's smug triumph into the biggest mistake of her life. Because this wasn't just a slap, it wasn't just a confrontation between two women. It was the collision of entitlement and dignity, racism and resilience, power and justice. And the entire room was about to see which one could survive the spotlight. Spago Beverly Hills, it wasn't just a restaurant. To some, it was a temple of exclusivity, a private theater where wealth and power performed for themselves. Every marble tile, every chandelier dripping with gold, every wine glass etched with perfection whispered the same message. This place separates the elite from the ordinary. Patricia Hartwell thrived in spaces like this. The high-pitched laugh she delivered at cocktail parties always seemed to echo a little louder when people stared. Her jewelry wasn't just decoration, it was a declaration. A diamond tennis bracelet catching the light under chandeliers said more than her voice ever could. Money buys belonging. And belonging? In her mind, it was hers to control. That's why when her eyes locked on Celeste Williams, a young black woman in that simple navy blue dress, sitting confidently alone at one of the premium tables, a spark of outrage ignited in her chest. To Patricia, the scene was an offense. Why? Because Celeste didn't look like she belonged. She wasn't dripping in couture gowns or designer handbags. She wasn't surrounded by assistants or dripping status signals. Just a calm woman sitting alone, graceful, quiet, dignified, and to the entitled eye, dignity itself looked like defiance. Patricia's whisper to her dinner companions carried across the white linen tablecloths. Look at her dress. Is she lost? She doesn't belong here. In moments, the mutters grew. A few heads turned. Some glanced sympathetically. Others with that familiar smirk that always arrives when privilege mixes with prejudice. She's out of her league. That was the ecosystem Patricia trusted. Too many people willing to laugh nervously, to stay silent, to let prejudice slip under chandeliers without challenge. In her world, power wasn't just in money. It was in confidence that nobody will stop you. But that night, her confidence would be crushed. Because the theater of entitlement she thought she owned was about to become a courtroom. And the woman in the navy dress, sitting calmly with her burning cheek, would soon redefine what true power actually looked like. Celeste Williams hadn't planned to make a statement that night. Her navy dress was nothing more than a choice of comfort. Cotton fabric, clean lines, modest length. It wasn't sewn by Versace or dripping with sequins. It wasn't designed to turn heads. It was designed to let her breathe. But in a room shaped by labels and logos, comfort became rebellion. Where Patricia Hartwell's whiteness, wealth, and wardrobe screamed, I deserve this space, Celeste's quiet presence said something far more radical. I belong here too, without needing to prove anything. This wasn't arrogance. This was survival. Because for Celeste, belonging had never come with ease. She grew up far from the chandeliers of Beverly Hills, in a West Detroit neighborhood where belonging meant fighting to be taken seriously in underfunded schools, locking doors at night against the sound of sirens, and watching her mother juggle 3 jobs so food stayed on the table. Celeste learned early, clothing doesn't armor you from prejudice. Money doesn't always silence bias. And grace, when worn with dignity, unsettles those who rely on fear. That's why she didn't flinch when Patricia's words stabbed. People like you don't belong here. The slap landed. Yes. The skin stung, yes. But deeper than the sting was a familiar ache, not just personal but generational. A memory of every time a black woman has been told that presence equals trespass. Yet even in pain, Celeste sat tall. Her trembling fingers touched her cheek, but her back did not bow. The navy dress became a symbol in that moment, though she hadn't chosen it to be one. It wasn't Target. It wasn't Valentino. It wasn't luxury. It was Celeste, authentic, unapologetic, belonging, and that authenticity, under the chandelier's glare, was more powerful than Patricia's slap could ever be. Whispers ripple quickly in places of wealth, not just through diners leaning across linen tables, but through decades of narratives dressed up as class but dripping with prejudice, because Patricia's slap didn't begin with Patricia. It began with a culture that has, for generations, painted black women with the wrong brush. On television screens and movie sets, the images repeat like background noise. The angry black woman who must be mocked or feared, the out-of-place outsider who is always the maid, the nanny, the extra standing behind the glamour of others, or the one-dimensional gold digger who only exists to attach herself to wealth. One after the other. Each stereotype tells society the same lie. Black women do not belong in elegance, dignity, or power. And the consequences? When a Celeste walks into a restaurant like Spago, calm, centered, wearing her authentic self, she isn't just seen as unusual. To someone like Patricia, she's seen as offensive, because culture has trained the entitled eye to believe luxury is ours. Respect is ours. Dignity is ours, not hers. This is the subtle drumbeat that makes racism feel like good manners. That allows Patricia to convince herself she was defending standards instead of exposing her own prejudice. It's why the room gasped at the slap but hesitated before reacting to the words. Words like, "People like you don't belong here." After all, society had whispered versions of that line for centuries. In country clubs, in schools, in neighborhoods marked red on maps, the slap wasn't just an act of violence, it was the performance of a cultural script, one where whiteness writes the guidelines for belonging, and black presence is always marked with an asterisk. But what Patricia and the other diners didn't know that night, Celeste was about to rewrite the script in real time, under the chandeliers, in front of every phone recording. Patricia's slap wasn't just powered by arrogance, it was powered by a system that taught her, without her ever saying the words out loud, that money, whiteness, and status could protect her from consequence. Think about the layers holding her up that night. Wealth and gatekeeping spaces like Beverly Hills restaurants don't just serve food, they serve hierarchy. Reservation lists, unspoken dress codes, and price tags aren't just about flavor, they are walls. Highly polished gold chandelier walls that say if you cannot perform wealth, you do not belong. Policy and policing of belonging, from the 20th century redlining maps that locked black families out of wealthy neighborhoods, to sundown towns where black visitors were unsafe after dark, to present-day security guards shadowing black shoppers in luxury stores. Systems are built on the assumption that black presence needs to be justified. Patricia didn't invent that assumption. She simply inherited it, the benefit of the doubt economy. Notice how the restaurant manager, frozen between the women, reflexively considered moving Celeste instead of confronting Patricia. That was the system at work in real time. In America's status economy, entitlement buys credibility. Whiteness buys benefit of the doubt. Blackness buys suspicion. The wage of silence. For centuries, when black women were humiliated, they were expected to stay quiet. A quiet domestic worker dismissed in front of employers. A quiet professional passed over for promotion. A quiet diner escorted out after making the space uncomfortable. Silence is part of the system too, the cost extracted for survival. And Patricia? She relied on all of it. She struck Celeste's face in public because she believed wealth insulated her. That status would rewrite the moment. That silence and systems would protect her, not her victim. But something shifted that night, because this time, silence wasn't the ending. The slap didn't disappear into the hidden corners of systemic routine. Instead, every phone in the room lit up to become a mirror, and the system that usually hides acts like this was about to amplify them for the world to see. This wasn't going to be business as usual. Patricia's hand may have landed in a glittering Beverly Hills restaurant, but its echo stretched far beyond Spago's chandeliers. Because this wasn't new. This wasn't unique. It was just another scene in a centuries-long drama performed on countless stages, across continents, across time, in America's past. During Jim Crow, "You don't belong here" wasn't just hissed in restaurants. It was written into law. Separate lunch counters, whites-only signs hanging in neon, black customers told with smirks, with words, with violence. Your money may be green, but you are not welcome here. In today's boardrooms across corporate America, black professionals still walk into high-power meetings where their presence is treated as surprise or token. Their credentials questioned, their authority undercut. The slap is quieter here, an interrupted sentence, an assumption they aren't the leader. But it wounds just the same. In Europe, in Paris and London, African and Afro-Caribbean immigrants face similar performances of exclusion. A black woman entering a high-end boutique is shadowed, asked repeatedly, "Do you need help?" Underneath, the insult is clear. Prove you're not a thief. Prove you can afford to exist here. In South Africa, years after apartheid, black workers clean the very hotels and serve food in the very restaurants where wealthy white elites still feel more at home. The system changed on paper, but the ghost of "you don't belong" still clings to the air in spaces of luxury. In Latin America, Afro-Latinas in Brazil have spoken of being called out of place at upper-class events. Skin tone policed not by law anymore, but by stares and whispers reminding them, this room was not built for you. And yet, despite centuries, despite geographies, the other side of the story is constant too. Resistance. The sit-ins of the 1960s, when black college students sat calmly at forbidden counters, daring the world to witness their dignity. The shop floor strikes in London, where migrant workers demanded equal pay and forced industries to reckon with their worth. The modern viral videos shared worldwide, capturing moments like Patricia's slap and refusing to let them disappear into silence. The locations change. The chandeliers, the uniforms, the accents shift, but the choreography is always the same. Entitlement tries to humiliate, and dignity chooses to resist. Celeste that night was in Beverly Hills, but she was also carrying every woman who ever sat at a table, in any country under that same stare, the one that says "you don't belong." For a heartbeat, the dining room was frozen. Forks midair, phones raised. The golden chandeliers seemed to hang heavier above the scene, waiting for someone to move, someone to speak. Patricia stood like a conqueror, chin high, smirk sharp, hand still buzzing from the slap. She expected submission. The room expected retreat. That's the script. A black woman is humiliated. She lowers her head, swallows her dignity, disappears quietly out the door. That's how it's worked for centuries. But Celeste Williams didn't move. She didn't run. She didn't hide. Instead, her trembling fingertips dropped from her burning cheek, and her voice, clear, low, razor steady, cut through the haughty silence. "This is about racism." The words detonated louder than the slap, louder than the whispers, louder than Patricia's smug entitlement. The entire restaurant shifted. Heads turned. Murmurs caught mid-throat. Even the waiters held their trays like statues. Patricia blinked. "Excuse me?" But Celeste didn't blink. Her eyes locked, unflinching, on her attacker. Her voice climbed stronger with each syllable. "You told me people like me don't belong. You humiliated me not because of my dress, not because of my seat, not because of anything I've done, but because I am a black woman in a place you decided I don't deserve to exist." Gasps rippled. Some eyes widened, others narrowed, some darted away in guilty recognition. For the first time all night, Patricia's certainty cracked. It was visible in the falter of her lips, in the flicker in her eyes. Because when racism is named out loud, it loses its camouflage of standards and manners, and now everyone saw it. This was the breaking point, not the slap, not the insult, but the refusal to stay silent about what everyone in the room witnessed, even if they hadn't wanted to admit it. Silence is the system's favorite weapon. Naming it is resistance. And in that chandelier-lit courtroom, Celeste had just flipped the trial. The word racism hung in the chandelier-lit air like a thunderclap. It made people uncomfortable. It always does. Patricia's face, still flushed with arrogance, twisted quickly into indignation. She laughed, a high, brittle, artificial sound to cover her shock. Racism? Oh, please. Don't play the race card, darling. I barely touched you and you became aggressive. Everyone here saw it. Her tone dripped with mock innocence, reshaping the story even as the red mark still glowed across Celeste's cheek. This is the oldest trick in the book. Rewrite the script mid-scene. The aggressor becomes the victim. The victim becomes aggressive. The slap becomes an act of defense. A few heads in the room nodded tentatively, not because they believed Patricia, but because believing her allowed them to stay comfortable. Then came another weapon. Status. Patricia's manicured hand gestured theatrically across the room. Do you know who I am? My family invests in half this city. My husband has more property than most of you could dream of. And you... Her eyes raked Celeste's simple navy dress like knives. This isn't your world. Stop embarrassing yourself and leave quietly, gasps trickled. Some waiters shuffled nervously. A manager hovered by the bar, frozen in indecision. But then another voice cut through. An older man near the window, his silver hair catching the chandelier's glow, stood slowly, his voice firm. No. Enough. I saw everything. This young lady was sitting quietly. You marched over. You insulted her. And then you struck her. Don't twist this. We all witnessed what really happened. It was like oxygen returned to the room. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. One voice gave permission for others to reject the lie. Whispers spread. She's right. I saw it too. That was unprovoked. She really did slap her. The tide was shifting. Patricia's playbook, deny, reframe, status flex, was suddenly faltering in the face of witnesses who finally refused the comfort of silence. Celeste stood taller now. Her voice was steadier than before. Don't tell me I'm exaggerating. Don't tell me I imagined it. And don't tell me it wasn't about race. You made it about race the moment you said people like you. The phone's recording captured everything, every denial, every witness, every counter-voice refusing to let truth be buried. For decades, racist acts relied on silence, on people deciding it was easier to look away. Not tonight, not here. This was no longer Patricia versus Celeste. This was truth versus gaslighting, and the room had chosen which side it believed. The room at Spago was no longer silent. What began as a slap had become something else entirely, a reckoning. Diners who'd frozen in fear minutes earlier were now whispering in support, shaking their heads at Patricia's arrogance, nodding at Celeste's clarity. For the first time, the story didn't belong to Patricia's privilege. It belonged to the truth, and truth always demands the same question. What next? Celeste's refusal to shrink had shifted the energy of the room, but the deeper shift was this. People started to ask themselves what silence really costs, because the slap wasn't an isolated event. It was a symptom of a million workplaces, where black women are talked over, a symptom of schools, where their daughters get harsher, disciplined than their peers, a symptom of hospitals, where their pain is ignored, symptom of boardrooms where they're qualified but not it. Patricia's hand was just one hand, but the system had prepared it for centuries. The path forward meant dismantling that preparation. Solidarity in the moment. The elderly man at the window modeled it. Speak up when you see injustice. One voice can shift a room. Silence protects aggressors. Witnessing protects dignity. Institutional accountability. The restaurant manager, who first leaned toward moving Celeste instead of disciplining Patricia, had to learn this truth. Neutrality in the face of racism isn't neutral, it's complicity. Policies, businesses, and institutions must own their role, enforce consequences, and create spaces where equality isn't just decoration in the mission statement. Redefining belonging, the navy dress should never have been a target. Comfort should not be defiance. The path forward means unhooking worth from couture and skin tone, and reminding everyone that dignity doesn't come from designer tags. It is inherent, always. Reparative action justice that matters isn't just apology, it's repair. Transformative change means more than Patricia's humiliation. It means choosing redemption through service, through confronting the biases that created this moment, through contributing to communities harmed by these same assumptions, and perhaps most importantly, the refusal to withdraw When Patricia struck Celeste, she expected her to leave. That was the victory she wanted. Instead, Celeste sat taller, stayed, claimed her space without apology. That choice lit a spark much larger than one confrontation, because if silence sustains systems, then presence cracks them. The path forward is refusing to disappear after the slap. Instead, it's turning humiliation into confrontation, confrontation into witness, witness into action. The slap had started as an act of arrogance, but it ended as a lesson, not just for Patricia, not just for Spago, but for every single person watching, in that room and beyond it. Because here's the truth. Patricia's hand wasn't the only thing raised that night. When Celeste raised her voice, when witnesses raised their courage, when bystanders raised their choice to speak instead of stay quiet, something shifted. This wasn't just a dinner scene in Beverly Hills. It was a mirror, a reflection of how racism hides behind chandeliers, behind money, behind polite words like standards and class, and how it falls apart the moment someone refuses to shrink. Celeste's navy dress will be remembered longer than Patricia's designer whites because it symbolized authentic worth, the kind of worth no slap, no insult, no system can erase. The question now doesn't belong to Celeste. It belongs to us. What happens the next time someone says, "People like you don't belong here"? What happens the next time silence seems easier than truth? Will we freeze? Will we scroll on? Will we avert our eyes? Or will we do what Celeste did? Sit taller, speak louder, draw boundaries, and remind the world that dignity isn't granted by the powerful. It's inherent to the oppressed. The slap was loud, yes. But louder still was the refusal to accept it quietly. And that's the real ending, not humiliation. Not silence, but the reminder that every act of resistance, every voice raised, every phone turned into a witness, makes the system weaker. So the next time you see it, remember Celeste in her navy dress and ask yourself, am I Patricia's silence? Or am I Celeste's defiance? Because one sustains racism and the other dismantles it.